So I just received a question over on YouTube, which when I was replying to the question in the comments, I thought of another question. It led on to another question because I said in the question, my reply to the question about the differences of when you produce music in Dolby Atmos. So I thought a good question to answer would be something along the lines of how does producing music in stereo differ from producing music in Dolby Atmos? And I'm not a producer, so I haven't actually sat down and produced music in Dolby Atmos, but I can tell you what people who are producers who are coming into this room and who have been in this room have experienced, and what I always talk to them about while they're here. Now, the one thing is every person who comes in here at the end of me talking with them, they are literally in a case of, you've ruined stereo for me. Stereo is now so inferior to Dolby Atmos. You've ruined it for me. I now have to go back to my stereo setup and kind of be deflated a little bit, in the sense that it's never going to sound like it does in here. But then I say to them, you know, we're working together. It's always going to sound superior to every other person who's working in stereo because you have me you're working with, kind of thing. But so the conversation kind of always goes, well, you can produce. You don't need a big Dolby Atmos studio. You don't need to spend upwards of £100,000 on a studio like this. You don't need to do that. If you get, for instance, Logic, you can use Logic and use binaural monitoring. Now, what binaural monitoring will do when working in Dolby Atmos in Logic, it will allow you to use your speakers, stereo speakers or headphones. Headphones are kind of better because you can gauge round the back a little bit better, and you can gauge height a little bit better in headphones. But you can use speakers and you can work in Dolby Atmos, albeit binaural. So you'll still only have your stereo speakers, but it will kind of sound like it's moving around the room a bit more. So you'll get this kind of a binaural panning that will allow you to put things up, back, front, but you obviously don't have, like in this room, you'll have the speakers at the front, which will play the music from the front. You'll have speakers at the back where anything you pan around the back comes from the back. So you actually have physical speakers that are playing over you. Obviously, you don't get that in binaural, but you can kind of, when you're producing, you can still visualize it and work with layers in binaural, stacking them on top of each other, and you can do that in Logic and using binaural monitoring. Now, the one thing that I kind of sit down and talk to people about when they're in here is, I say to them, look, when you're producing music, when you produce music, you think left and right, front and center, left and right. If you were to be in here, you no longer think about music as left and right. You think of music as, okay, I could have left here, right here. I could have back here, left and right. Okay. And then you've got layers on top of that. So let's say, for instance, you've got strings. Now, I love doing this, and I love doing this with strings. Whenever I'm doing anything film related or anything that's got strings in generally, I love doing this with strings. Same with pads. Guitars works great with as well. But strings is a prime example, because strings, you can put the cello here, right? So you can put the cellos around ear level here, right? Then on top of that, you can stack another violin over the top of that. Then you've got violas you can put on the ceiling. So you get this stack of sound. So no longer is it just left and right. You've got left and right of you here, or you can have left and right of you up the front, left and right at the back. But let's just talk about left and right of you at ear level here. So you've got left and right, but then you've got a stack of sound that goes up over you like that, which the general producer does not think in those sorts of in that sort of sense. You don't think like that, and it's only when you get into a room and you kind of you look at the possibilities of what you can do, because this is what I'm doing when I'm mixing sound here, mixing it here, and I'm mixing it in stacked layers, for instance, and then I'm mixing it further back of the room, front of the room, you know, closer to me, further away from me, up, down, front, back, all like literally in a kind of as a room is. But then it's getting the head, as a producer, it's getting your head around that that's possible, because you've only ever known left and right stereo. So being able to work like that, it changes your thought process. And a great way to adapt that thought process is to work in binaural stereo, working in Dolby Atmos in like Logic. I'm not sure of any other doors that support it as a format that is kind of built in. Logic just has it built in because obviously Logic is Apple, and Apple are pushing spatial audio. Spatial audio is Dolby Atmos, and basically that's their format. That's their kind of, they'll make that change from stereo to Dolby Atmos as standard. It's already becoming default. So basically getting your head around production in Dolby Atmos is just basically thinking of yourself in a physical room. Think of yourself in your room. Now, if you think of yourself in your room at home, right, your production suite, you've got your desk there, your monitor there, and you've got your left and right speakers there and there. Then just think of if you were working in Dolby Atmos in Logic, for instance, just think of that room is your actual room. So just think when you pan something to the back of that room, it's going to the back of that room. Or a great thing to do would be a good way of getting a visual representation of what it actually is and what the speaker arrangement is. If you go onto our website on the mixing page or the Dolby Atmos page, you scroll down. We were doing interviews with PMC, who supplied all our speakers. So they did a 360 video of the room, like a 360 image you can pan round. So what you can actually do is look at the Logic kind of display, which shows you the room layout, and then you can actually think to yourself, right, okay, that room is that room, and you can see where the speakers are, and you can get a good gauge of exactly how that kind of image in the visuals in Logic will translate and transfer into a room like this. So you'll get a good idea of that. And that's what it's all about. Is at the moment, if you're working in binaural stereo, monitoring in binaural inside Logic, for instance, it's just getting your head around the concept of Dolby Atmos, because we are so used to stereo left and right, and believe me, it took me a little while to adapt from stereo to Dolby Atmos. I'm very much glad that we did, because it is ridiculously good. So yeah, that's one thing to think about is producing in Dolby Atmos, because when you start producing in Dolby Atmos, you think of things differently. You know, like panning isn't just left and right. You know, if panning's left, right, up, down, you got X, Y, Z axis. You know, there's all sorts you can do, and it will make the production a lot of fun. As you know, mixing becomes a lot more fun working in Dolby Atmos as well. So yeah, there we go. Yeah, I mean, try and produce in Dolby Atmos. Have a listen to how it sounds. Something that my people I know who are producers, what they are all doing now is they are all producing in Dolby Atmos, everybody kind of producing in Dolby Atmos, rendering down to binaural stereo and achieving a superior stereo sound to normal stereo. So even if you were working in Dolby Atmos in binaural and then printing that binaural mix, you're still achieving a very much superior mix to whatever you would achieve working in just standard stereo. And it really is something quite special when you do start working in Dolby Atmos.